Hello everyone, I'm Alan Hyde and welcome to BARC'ing Mad, the official podcast of the British Automobile Racing Club. Now, if you're after a podcast that talks about all things motorsport, both in the UK and around the world, then you've come to the right place, because every fortnight we bring you just that. And more often than not, some rather special guests that get involved as well. Now, believe it or not, this is episode 11 of our inaugural series, which means we've got just one more to go after this. Of course, we can't do anything more on this edition until I've introduced my BARC'ing Mad co-host. So let's do just that. Hello to Ian Waterhouse. Hi, Ian.
Alan, how are you? It's great to see you again, and lovely intro. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I read every single word of it perfectly. Well, almost. Actually, I didn't, did I? No. That's good very
enough,
much
Alan.
the name.
Good enough. Don't worry.
That it's close enough for jazz. It's yeah, that's very much the mark of the BARC'ing Mad podcast. Now, what have you been up to, Mr. Waterhouse, since we spoke last?
Football, actually, Alan. Lots and lots of I probably shouldn't talk about it. Actually,
I've been seeing a few of your updates.
An awful lot of football. Yeah.
So I haven't really been motor racing either. However, I did give you a glimpse before Saturday week ago of what I was doing at the weekend, and now I've done it, which was to go on a charity tractor run. And
yes, how was it? Remarkable.
It was just the most incredible day. It was I couldn't have predicted it was going to be anything like the way it was. We were in a very, very big tractor, a modern tractor, brand new, in fact it was. The rear wheel of the tractor was slightly taller than me. There is a photograph of me standing by.
Not hard that though, is it?
It shut your face. But
I'm not one to talk either, Alan. Don't worry, I'm not one to talk either.
But it's got all the latest. So naturally, it's got all the latest gizmos inside. It's got the basically iPads all over the place. But it also had, and this really did meet with my approval, a subwoofer on the sound system. I mean, it was nice. Just brilliant. But the reason I loved the day so much, it was a charity thing. It was the Hampshire young farmers that had organised this. They organise it every year. You do about 26 miles on a route around Hampshire, and the weather wasn't good. It was pouring down with rain. However, every town we went into, the streets were lined and everyone was waving, and youngsters were out there holding up their toy tractors, and it was just the most, in the pouring rain, it was the most feel-good event. I got home in the evening.
Did you get to drive?
So
did you get to drive a tractor?
So obviously, no is the official answer. I didn't drive the tractor on the run.
I love the way you say that. No.
Well, but then I was encouraged when we got back. Laura, who was driving the tractor, encouraged me when we got back to the depot. So private land and big area of tarmac in the middle, encouraged me to have a go, and I declined because I didn't want to look silly and get it all wrong. But in the end, she wasn't taking any of it, and made me drive it. It was fantastic. Honestly, just brilliant. I'm going to do another one of them at the end of the year, a Christmas one where they light up the tractors, and because it was just
you've got to invite me along, Alan. It's not Hampshire's down the road for me. You've got to invite me along. I'd love to come to that.
It is. Yeah, Romsey and District. That's where you need to go. 23rd of December. We'll have tinsel everywhere and lights everywhere. It's kind of what I like motor racing for, the feel-good event. You've got an event this weekend, the finale of the British Truck Racing Championship, the fireworks, everything at Brands Hatch. It's a feel-good event, and that's what this tractor run was.
Well, I am pleased to let everybody know then that because Alan didn't drive the tractor, the streets and roads of Hampshire are safe once more.
They can be safe again. Yeah.
It can be safe until December, till the 23rd of December. So
until the 20th, I won't be driving it. I promise you. I'll be going on the passenger seat. Absolutely not. I'm very happy because I had the subwoofer just behind me. Right, Ian, shall I tell you what's coming up in today's episode? With
Please do.
The end of the series drawing closer, I thought it might be a good idea to devise a plan for a somewhat impromptu BARC'ing Mad Awards for our final episode. Now, the final episode is going to be a little bit unusual in as much as I'm not going to be in the UK. I'm going to be in a hotel room in Macau for the Macau Grand Prix, 2 weeks of the Macau Grand Prix. So for the final episode, we could even get BARC event manager David Whedon, friend of the podcast, back on to pick some winners. But obviously, before we get anywhere near that, we need to get some categories first. So I think in this episode, maybe you and I should come up with a handful of categories. We can put them out to our listeners and viewers, and see if they agree. Whether maybe they will have some suggestions, or maybe they can say that our ideas are barking mad and we shouldn't do them. So, and then later on in the episode, once we've finished this discussion about the final episode, we will have a great guest. We only need one guest because. He could talk for England. He could talk for the rest of the world as well. We've got one of the finest motorsport commentators on the planet coming to join us, David Addison. So absolutely delighted to have David on a little bit later. But before all that, Ian.
Well, yes, before all that, it is time to tell you all about our fantastic partners, BP Fleet Solutions UK, who allow you to invest less on fuel and more on winning. A BP Fleet Solution keeps on delivering with huge value for BARC'ing Mad listeners. They are now offering 8p per litre off fuel at 1,200 UK petrol stations, naturally across the UK. This exclusive offer for BARC members and BARC'ing Mad listeners saves you 8p per litre off standard and premium grade fuels. Now, also significant savings to be made on electric charging too. This is an offer exclusive to the BARC'ing Mad podcast.
See, there are many benefits to listening and to watching the BARC'ing Mad podcast, and our listenership and viewership grows from podcast to podcast. And just think about this, Ian. Over the Christmas period, over the winter period, people could be discovering this for the first time. I think, what have I missed out on? They can binge on us.
What a treat for them!
It's
going to be like Christmas every day for them, won't it? Really?
Yes. Yes, I suppose that's one way.
We should have an advent calendar of BARC'ing Mad, shouldn't we?
It doesn't bear thinking about. Right. Now, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we're thinking about the end of the 2023 season now, which has come before we know it. And we should do what most people do, which is to look back fondly on the year and hand out some awards. So have you got any idea of what awards we might like to think about for our final episode, Ian? Have you got anything in mind?
I've got some proper ones. And then I've got some not so proper ones, but we are asking for people's help with this as well. So please do pop down in the comments on the YouTube at the BARC.
Can I get
YouTube
my pencil?
Channel.
I'll get my pencil.
Get your pencil. If you're watching this, if you've got some categories that you like, they can be pretty crazy as well. We've naturally got driver of the year. I mean, that's an obvious one, isn't it?
That makes sense.
Certainly, we're gonna pick race
from
of the year.
from anywhere in UK motorsport, anywhere at all.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we could keep it BARC related, that would be better.
Yes.
But, if there's... Put your case forward as well in the comment section as well. And you as well, Alan, and myself, because we'll come up with our own people we want to nominate. But I think we should have to justify it as well, not just put a name out there. I think we justify it. But do, in the comments, nominate, but maybe just put a little sentence as to why. Maybe event of the year. That would be a good category, wouldn't it?
Okay, I like that one.
There's quite a few there. Moment of the year.
Okay, what a motorsport moment or a moment on the BARC'ing Mad podcast?
Why don't we have two awards for that one? A BARC'ing Mad only one, and maybe a general one as well. There's no rules to this, everybody. By the way, we can have whatever you want, basically, can't we?
We absolutely can. Yeah.
Have you got a few ideas, Alan, for categories?
I would say there needs to be a race of the year. I think that would be. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to pluck that inevitably from the races that I've actually been working at. So we can throw it a lot wider. And people have been to races that I haven't been to, that you haven't been to. So ideas about that would be very welcome. But I think we also need to think about specifically about the BARC'ing Mad podcast. I'd rather not say guest of the year, but maybe a guest story of the year. One of the stories that we've gleaned over the course of this year, maybe a guest story. So,
yeah,
I don't want to say guest of the year because they've all been absolutely brilliant this year. Every single guest has been different, has had things to say, but a guest story of the year would be a really good word. And I also think I know our intrepid sound engineer and video engineer on this project, Matt Jones, records a lot of things that we don't know have been recorded. So it would be kind of cool if we had a podcast outtake of the year, because I know he's been saving these up for legal action at some stage in the future. So if he can rifle through all of the outtakes that we've got over the course of the year, maybe Matt Jones can come up with his podcast outtake of the year.
That could take a while. I mean, there's been quite a few, so that could be quite.
Well, that's why he gets it. That's why he's on the big dollars, Ian. That's why he's on the big money.
Is he? Oh, well. Do you know what I also think we should do though? I think we should celebrate the people in motorsport who perhaps, we everybody does awards each year, don't they? And it is driver of the year and overtake of the year and these types of things. Why don't we have something like BARC Mechanic of the Year? If you've got a team member, if you're a race driver or just part of a team, and one of your team mates have gone above and beyond this year, nominate them. So it could be, I mean, I've written down Mechanic of the Year, but I suppose it could just be Team Member of the Year. Could it? Something like that. I think we should, and maybe Marshal of the Year as well. Let's go for the real heroes of motorsport at club level.
Make it wider than Marshal of the Year, Volunteer of the Year, because many people over the course of a race weekend are volunteers and marshals. Of course, we couldn't do it, but you'll also find people on a rescue unit, all of those kind of things. It's not a paid role; they're giving up their time. So, Volunteer of the Year, I quite like. So we've kind of come up with a list there, haven't we?
Well, I've got another one.
Have you,
Alan? Because yeah, I don't know if you're going to like it because I know you're partial to a nice leather jacket. So I've done the Alan Hyde Best Jacket of the Season award. So if anybody out there's got a particularly nice motor racing jacket or a nice leather jacket or something you wear at the track, please do send them in, and Alan Hyde will be the official judge of that one. We'll declare the winner. So that's my one that I really want to throw in there.
And inevitably in Macau, I will have the leather jacket with me, so I could very possibly wear it for the final episode. I think that's quite good. Now, our producer is going to have written all of these down. Is that right? And then we can we can make sure that we've got all of these. How many categories? Must have come up with 20 odd categories now.
I mean, if anybody's got any others, again, please do comment below. This podcast is obviously about the wonderful guests that we have on and talking all things motorsport. It's about you listening and watching as well. It is interactive, so get in touch with us in that comment section. Drop them in, and if our producers deem them fit, then who knows? You could have your own award for the BARC'ing Mad podcast. How cool would that be?
I rather like
do
the idea
get
of
in
this.
contact with us. Yeah,
this is a great
I think
one.
that's going to be pretty good.
So that's pretty much takes care of our final episode of the year, which is in a couple of weeks' time. As I've already said, I'm going to be in Macau. Ian, you're going to be in one of your many homes around the UK that you broadcast from. I know your penchant for turning up in various people's houses, putting your backdrop up, moving a microphone in. And
they don't know it. I just turn up. I just spot an empty house and just go in.
So, you're all over the place. Do you think we ought to have a little think about introducing our guest?
I think we should get on with this because this is an absolute cracker. And this, of course, as ever, Alan, is the BARC'ing Mad podcast.
Right, it's about time we welcomed our guest for this episode, and I'm very much looking forward to this because he is simply one of the... Who wrote this? He is simply one of the finest commentators in the sport, and many of you will know his work on ITV and the Quick Fit British Touring Car Championship. It's a very warm welcome to David Addison. Hello, David.
Hello. Right, I owe you $5 at least for that, don't I, both of you, for the wonderful introduction. Yes. To prove there's no anticlimax, here goes. Yeah.
It's a really cool thing. When I saw that you were going to be our guest on this episode of BARC'ing Mad, I thought first thing I thought was it's about blooming time too, and second I thought we only need one guest, because I think what we can cover over the course of this over this podcast is going to fill up the entire duration.
Well, I have been told, David, we never met before. I understand you know Alan quite well. I have been told that, this we like to talk a little bit. So I'm very much looking forward to this, because we've got a lot to talk about as well, haven't we, Alan?
Three blokes who like to talk about motor racing all together. It's being recorded. What could possibly go wrong? David, the first thing that we really wanted to talk about was to tell people how you got to this point. You're the voice of ITV's coverage of the BTCC.
It's incredibly simple. If you have a surname that starts with A and you're cheap, people don't look a long way down the list. It's kept me in work for nearly 30 years. It's as straightforward as that. No, I mean, the motor racing interest started when I was a small boy. And there is a BARC connection, because the very first meeting I went to was a BARC Northwest Centre organised meeting at Alton Park, the last event of 1977. So the BARC kind of has a bit to answer for in all of this. And it was through being a fan stood, by the side of Alton Park, wanting to get involved. And being a driver never really appealed. But if you can picture Alton Park, there used to be at Knickerbrook the very tall commentary tower. And that's where we were stood watching racing down on the ground, and I used to look longingly up at this bloke in the dry with a better view than I had, and I thought, well, that must be quite a cool
what sort of age?
Go watch racing.
What sort of age were you looking up at the commentator and thinking, yeah, I'd like to do this?
14, 15, probably round about that.
Yeah.
And it was partly because it was a cool view, and it was partly, I think, because to me, listening to the commentary at a race meeting was part of the experience. It wasn't just some noise in the background. It was part of it. A bit like the first thing I do when I come home is put the radio on, not the TV, but I'm a radio person. I like listening to the radio and different voices, different sounds and whatnot. And maybe also part of the catalyst was something my father said, Lord rest him, which was, if you can remember, Alan, you were probably there as well, the 1984 British Grand Prix. On the Friday, Johnny Cecotto had his accident at between Westfield and Dingledale, and there was this very long stoppage, and Brian Jones was trying to keep talking. This was before we had the days of circuit radio and things and playing music or anything else. And Brian's talking away, and no all 12-year-old is heckling or chipping in or correcting or finishing the sentence. And my father said, "You should try doing this." And I think what he meant was, "Shut up! Shut up, you annoying child." But I thought, no, that could be quite, not a bad idea, that. And that's kind of what fueled the desire to commentate on it.
Was your father a big motorsport fan as well, then, David?
Sorry, Ian, say again.
So I was just saying, was your father a big motorsport fan as well?
No.
He took you to Alton, or?
No, I think he'd been to Alton Park as a youth because it was the local circuit. But there was no motor racing sort of history in the family. In fact, on a regular Saturday, because Alton runs Saturdays more than Sundays, he used to go and watch Manchester United, and either my mum would take me to Alton Park, or a friend and his dad would take me. And the reason that we went in the first place was because a lady called Margaret Simpson, who is still the chief marshal at Alton Park, whether it's a BARC event or MSVI or whoever, Margaret's mother was friendly with my grandmother. And it's one of those things, small boy liked cars, and Margaret and David, her late husband, who was also used to be a marshal, said, perfect sort of kill or cure type thing, send him to Alton Park for the day. They got us tickets and we went. And I don't remember a huge amount about it, but I remember not enjoying walking over the old footbridge at Deer Leap as a grid of cars blasted away. And that was a bit noisy. And then sort of drove home in silence, and parents knowingly looked at each other. Good, it's got him out of that. Excellent. And then 3 weeks later or so, and my mother will happily tell you this story to this day, she was mortified to come home from work and find that all the dinner placemats were missing. And they were in the front room, roughly laid out in the outline of Alton Park. And toy cars were lined up in and this dates it, 3-2-3 grid formation, at which point they thought we might have a problem here. And it's gone from there. It's gone from there.
So you mentioned the 1984 British Grand Prix, which was at Brands Hatch. You were there. That was my first Grand Prix.
Yeah.
That was the first Grand Prix I went to. So we were in the same place at the same time.
Yeah,
and
at the same time. Yeah.
And then I don't know how many years later, 9 years later, we end up sort of sharing a commentary box together for the first time, because we've been on the journey almost to the year together, haven't we? Really?
Yeah, I think I started
bit before me.
91, April 91.
Yeah, 2 years. 2 years before me.
Yeah, I was 18 when I was first given a microphone, again at a BARC event, as it turns out. The connections still are there, aren't they? And it was again, this dates us. This was before packages of races happened. So the first two events I did were at Donington. The first weekend was BARC, which was Formula 3, and the Production Saloon Car Championship and MG Owners Club and things like that. And then the second week was another club, and that was British Touring Car Championship, before it became part of a package. And both of those events I went off and did effectively I was pretending to be you, Alan. I did the interviews at the end of the race. And I can remember the first race at Donington, standing there terribly nervous with my radio mic, waiting for the winner, who came into the pit lane, and I've got all these fantastic questions that I'm going to launch at him, and he drove straight past me, right down to the end of the pit lane, straight into the paddock.
I've had that many a time, yeah.
That was that. Back up the stairs, second race of the day. Okay, right, more questions. So that was that. It was a slightly hesitant start, but we got that.
I was just intrigued. You said you were 18 when you first picked up. Like, how did it come about then? Because you were at 14, 15, you were looking up at the comments you're going through thinking, I want to give it a go. How did it go from thinking, I want to give it a go, to actually getting the mic in hand? Because it doesn't just happen, does it?
No. So part of that was that I wrote to a chap called Michael Cookson, who was then and still is an Alton Park commentator, and said, look, I'd like to get involved. I'd like to commentate. What advice do you have? And Michael suggested doing what he had done, which was to be a lap charter for a commentator. Because again, you've got to put this in the context of the time. Timing screens, if you had one at all, were a fairly crude device. Any information was a long way off what we have now, with all the sectors and thousandths of a second of timing and so forth. So a commentator needed a lap charter, so he could quickly look to his left or right and see what the race order was, or see if somebody had gained a place or dropped a place or whatever. Mike had done that with Neville Hay in the 1970s. Neville had got Michael started, and so that happened. And in 1990, Mike went to do 2 or 3 Donington meetings, and Donington and a couple of other places, and lots of BARC events also. The commentary was organised by a chap called Robin Bradford, and I said to Robin, look, I'd quite like to have a go at this. If ever you have a spare hole that you need filling with a voice, I'd love to have a go. And I probably made a nuisance of myself. And Robin, and anybody that knows him, will be able to sort of hear him say this. Robin, for 1991, relented and let me have a handful of dates. And he said, the only way we could shut you up was to let you talk. And if you follow the logic of that, it's very Robin. But he was absolutely right.
Yes. He was the guy that used to organise all of the commentators for the national racing scene in the UK, and I can hear him saying that. What you've touched upon there, David, is your incredible talent for mimicking other people, and you did just mention Neville Hay. These are commentators of yesteryear, and Neville was a friend to you and a friend to me. Neville used to smoke a lot. He doesn't smoke anymore. You've never smoked. However, in an uncanny way, you're able to replicate his voice in a quite beautiful way. Some of your Neville stories are incredible. Can you give us a Neville story? Can you give us a Neville Hay story?
I better do one with a BARC connection, hadn't I? Which probably goes back to the mid to late 70s, and Bleak Machine at the ready. So Nev told me this story of being in the old commentary box. You've heard this, you can stop giggling. The old commentary box, Ian, at the chicane.
I'm glad you're telling this one.
You used to be on it was a wooden shed on stilts, high up in the gods. And at the end of whichever race meeting it was the last race of the day. And Alan is right. Neville used to smoke like a factory chimney. And he said, we got to the end of the day, and I looked down, and the commentary box is on fire. There's all this orange on the floor. The box is on fire. And I get them to the chicane, and they go up to the complex, and Simon Taylor was there, and he started talking, and I looked down, and this thing, and it goes on and on and on, you see, about the box being on fire. And by the time he's worked out that this inferno is getting bigger and bigger, they're back at the chicane. I've got to start talking again. And this went on for 2 or 3 laps. And he's worked out by this stage that, as it's the last race of the day, any bottles of water that he had have gone. Flask of coffee is emptied. And Richard Hay, his son, Richard went on to race and be a big player, of course, in motorsport television. Neb said, they start the last lap, and I turned the microphone off, and I said to Richard, don't just stand there, stop pissing. And they peed on the flames and put the fire out, and that was that to the end of the day. So thank Lord that commentary box is no more, because that would have been right, I think, after those two had had a go at it. But
that's brilliant.
Neville was just a great character.
That voice
he's
is
probably one of the very.
Ian.
Do you know he's on a pop record?
I did not know. No.
He is. If you again, for our older listeners, if you go and find The Race by Yellow, which was 87, 88 when it came out, the B side of that is a sporting mix, and what they've taken bits of commentary randomly. There's some horse racing and some boxing or whatever it might be, but they've taken bits from the very first Radio Le Mans, the video, which was Neville and Richard and Bob Constanduris that year. And so quite a lot of Neville's quotes from Le Mans that year are on this B-side of a Yellow.
Well, I didn't know that. Absolutely super. Thank you for doing that.
What's the track again? What's the
it was called The Race, pure and simple, The Race. Right. Yeah. And you'll have heard it in movies and on adverts, and it was a big money spinner for them. So anyway, right, that was Neville. Good, he's a great character. Yes.
Thank you. We thought we'd throw that one in.
Yeah, I love that though. Some great stories. And let's bring it back to you though, because we mentioned about Neville there and his commentary appearing on records, but you've got a few sayings yourself as well, David, and I think I'd love to know how you came up with these. One of them is away like a stabbed rat. Another is on like a fat pigeon on a chip. How did you come up with these?
Well, it's probably listening to the radio and listening to people, and you hear things. There was a northern comedy writer called Mike Craig who once said that there are people that say funny things and people that say things funny. And you listen to things and you think, oh, that's quite amusing, and then you sort of tweak it. And play around with things. The stabbed rat doesn't get as much coverage as it used to because people don't make good starts anymore. So I did change it for the last round at Brands, and somebody made a bad start, and I said they were away like a drugged slug, which seemed to fit. And it came to me. Somebody misheard it as a drunk slug, which I think is probably about the same, if a bit more diagonal.
Yeah,
but it's comparable. But you'll hear things and you think, oh, that's quite an interesting phrase, and you might play around with it or tweak it. And sometimes you just hear yourself say it. The fat pigeon on a chip. I can't remember where that came from, but somebody made a meme out of it. A friend of mine got some T-shirts made for our sort of running club with fat pigeon on a chip running club and stuff emblazoned on the back. But where that came from, I can't tell you to this day. It just. Have I just said that? Yeah. It's very
Do you try and get them in before? Do you have a few lines that you think, if I get the opportunity, I'm going to chuck that in, or is it just appear?
Most of them appear, because the danger is that if you do try to sort of engineer them, they don't sound right. They don't sound.
It can sound
yeah.
engineered, can't it?
Yeah. Occasionally, people will say, right, here's today's word, see if you can get this in. I mean, quite often this year, during qualifying, we've had text messages from Jason Plato, who's offered up lines to try and squeeze in, see if you can do this.
Has he?
And sometimes,
can you tell us any? Can you tell us any lines?
they're not. No, they're not as inflammatory as you might think. I think one of them was something about a shark fin. And this was at Croft. So I did say, as they go down the pit lane, you see the roof of the car or the rear wing like a shark's fin or something like that. It was a bit contrived, but I got it in. Sometimes people will challenge you to a word. The one that I did think I might try and use, and this was a planned one, purely to see the reaction on his face, was when Paul O'Neill did Thruxton with me a couple of years ago. Tim was racing Porsches, and in that era, we couldn't have people going in and out of the TV compound because it was within COVID. So once you were in your workplace, ITV said that's where you've got to stay. So Tim was racing, he couldn't come in and out. So Paul did touring cars. And I think I said, did we have Josh Cook battling with Ash Sutton for the lead? And I said to hold off Ash, Josh is going to have to work harder than a fat lad's arteries. And out of the corner of my eye, I watched Paul's face. His eyes come out and sort of like, where the hell is he going with this? And it was done partly for the reaction you two have just offered, but also just to see how he coped with it, because that's the end of the sentence. So I can do that, and I can possibly look clever, but it's the other Paul Mugger that's got to carry on talking and
So
pick
you
up on the
then
back
be
of it.
completely quiet. You put him in.
That's your problem, mate. Off you go. Knock yourself out. Yeah. Winner.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Okay, so what I would like to know more about not just the commentary, but about your whole working life, because from the age of 18, you picked up a microphone. You were good. You were good from the word go, and
Very kind.
it freaked me out at the time, to be honest, because you were on Screen Sport. You were doing things on Eurosport, I think, as well. And I was watching those programs, having already picked up a microphone myself, and thinking, David is young. He's 11 years younger than me, and yet he's on it. And then that sort of led to a wider career in journalism around motorsport. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what on earth would you have done with your life had you not taken that route at 18 years old?
Well, at 18 years of age, I was at university, or college and then university. And I went from that with a business enterprise degree, it was called, to work for the Manchester Chamber of Commerce. And I was their press officer for 2 or 3 years, which was great because it was a complete divide between doing PA commentary at the weekend and having a job in the real world. And actually, it was a really interesting time to be doing something for Manchester, because this was around about the time of the Manchester bomb. And so going back into work that following week with the phone ringing off the hook from all sorts of media outlets wanting a quote from the Chamber of Commerce about, what this will do to the business industry, what this will do to people, thoughts condemning what's been on, all sorts of things. And I can remember one Friday afternoon, the phone rang and an Irish voice said, this is President Robinson's office. This was Mary Robinson, who was the President of Ireland at the time. And she'd like to come to Manchester tomorrow and meet key business leaders. And within sort of 12 hours, I had to rustle up the dignitaries of Manchester's business to
Wow.
be there and greet on a Saturday morning. It's things like that were absolutely fascinating. We had the annual dinner one year. So this would have been around about 96, 97. Tony Blair was the guest speaker. So, I had to, in a very tangential way, deal with him and Alistair Campbell, who was there as his chaperone, spokesperson, PR person, fixer, you name it. And I didn't have a lot to do with them, in fairness, but it was around that time. So it was a complete contrast from motorsport. So there was never a desire to go and make a full-time living out of this. I wanted to go and have a sort of marketing related job, and the press officer role kind of fell at my feet because I'd gone to work at the Chamber initially in marketing. The press officer was moved on for various reasons, and I said, well, look, I've done a bit of writing. If you've got a problem and you need somebody to fill the hole for a week or two, and then they just kept me on permanently. So that was doing press releases, media relations and all of that, and putting together a newspaper every 2 months that went out to the membership. So that taught me a lot about proper journalism and publishing and print and all of that.
which you do now in motorsport.
Well, yeah, not to the same degree. I mean, I left the chamber. I went to work for a training and enterprise council in Bolton. I then went to work for a PR firm in Manchester, which at the time was looking after the account for Champion Spark Plugs and that group of companies, and did some cable and wireless stuff. And I left there late '99 with one of the clients, started on my own. And around that time, the BRDC and Silverstone created something called Power Tour, which was Formula 3, British GT and National Saloon Cup on a package. And they said, right, would you like to be involved? We'd like you to look after the commentary. We'd like you to look after the PR. We'd like you to look after publishing all the programs. And it was, if you like, the golden ticket to launch a business off. And then as that died, it became a bit harder to have quite the same income, and people wanted to cut deals, and the British motor racing had changed and packages had created. But we still do a few programs now and again, and I write for British titles, and I've written for Australian magazines, and the next job once I've done this is to look at the last set of proofs for a book that I've just done for an Australian publisher, which will be out next year in the UK. So
wow,
that ticks over as well as a little sideline. Yeah.
Wow.
Can you tell us a bit more about that, David? Tell us more about the book.
The book, it is called The Immortals of British Motor Racing. So so much of what I've achieved has kind of been in the right place at the right time. And back in 2008, I used to go out to commentate at Bathurst for the 1000 Ks. And one of the other Australian commentators went on to edit a magazine. He left that. He went to work for a publishing company. And has become what's his title? It's something like head of acquisitions or something like that. But anyway, he comes up with titles and finds people to write them. And so in Australia, they've done this series called Immortals, and they've done motor racing, which obviously is Australian touring car racing. There's a rugby one, there's a cricket one, there's a Aussie rules, there's horse racing, I think. And they wanted to expand doing a similar thing in the UK. So I think there's a cricket one. I think there might be a soccer one, and they wanted a motor racing one. And so this guy, Luke West, got in touch and he said, how do you fancy writing a book? So I had to come up with my 12 Immortals, which in a way is a silly title because by definition they can't be. But it's kind of, in my eyes, it's people that have made a huge contribution to the sport and whose memory lives on. Whatever they've achieved, even after they've either died or retired from racing, they remain in people's conscience within the sport, consciousness within the sport. So there are 12. I won't tell you the 12. You can go away and ponder who they might be and see if you're right, and then buy a copy next year when it hits the shelves.
Can we get people to comment below, David, and then when this goes out on YouTube, have a look back and see if anybody's got any right, and give it a little like, give the comment a little like.
If anybody gets all 12, they might get a free copy. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Let's see
there we go. You heard it here first, everybody.
If you get all 12, I'll do it. Yeah. But it's been quite a nice little project, that, trying to come up with the 12, and I've had an argument with myself about a few, and I've talked to other people, and they've said, no, you can't include them. What about that person? And trying to justify it. And I'm sure people will disagree with the 12.
It's got to be your opinion, isn't it? So someone's always going to disagree. So they're always going to disagree.
Exactly. But, it's, in my opinion, if I can justify it, then hopefully people will understand why I've gone with that. Yeah.
David, you've commentated at some of the, pretty much all of the great motor races in the UK and in the world. What was the one that stood out when you found out that you were going to be commentating at this that stands out above any other at the time?
One would, I suppose, be the British Grand Prix because of what it is, but that wasn't necessarily the phone rings, can you come and do the commentary at the Grand Prix? Because I started off being part of a big team of people doing the pit lane for the support races, and then eventually I went and did the second box and then took over the main box. So that was a slow burn. But standing in the Silverstone box on Grand Prix day, thinking, there's going to be 100,000 people here listening. I know there are more that listen to ITV touring cars, but when you can sort of see quite a lot of them, you know what this is like as well.
Yes.
You're dealing with people. That's still a big buzz.
And do you still get nervous?
Get more? Or certainly the adrenaline pumps. Far more doing that than touring cars, I think, because you can see people around you. Touring cars however many people are listening at home, I can see two people. There's Tim next to me and our audio guy standing behind.
Yeah.
It's
yes.
Okay. Yes, there is a certain amount of adrenaline, but Grand Prix Day is a bit different. Probably the biggest buzz was when the email came from Australia to say, yes, we'd like you to come and do Bathurst. And that was 08. I've been a couple of times before, because in 02 and 03 there was a 24-hour GT race, which didn't get a mega entry. And in a way, it was a bit like going to an ex-girlfriend's wedding, really. You got to Bathurst, and there wasn't a crowd, and there wasn't the atmosphere, but there was the circuit, and it felt a bit shortchanged, a bit like, as I say, going to an ex-girlfriend's wedding, that it's all happening for them and not for you, sort of thing. But I knew what the circuit was like. So when I went back in 08 and got the full experience, and I did 4 years, I think, back to back, going out to do the track commentary for that. And that was fantastic, because it was at that time purely Holden and Ford. It was that complete tribalism between red and blue, he says with his Holden t-shirt on. And it was fantastic. And for the top 10 shootout on the Saturday, so in Australia for track commentary, what they were doing was have one person for a championship. So rather than, say, Alan, for a token meeting where you and Chris, or you and Matt do the whole day, they'd have somebody as an anchor, a bit like a radio presenter, and then somebody would do V8 Supercars, somebody would do the Ute, somebody would do Carrera Cup, whatever it would be. And that year, it was a new commentator for V8 Supercars, a chap called Paul Marinelli. And Paul said, right, for the top 10 shootout, I think we should do it a car at a time. I said, yeah, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And he said, and I think, because I'm the series commentator, I should go first. Yeah, absolutely, because quickly I'd worked out that means I'd get the last car. Happy days, that's fine. Not a problem, Paul. I totally agree. Yes, no, it's your show, your gig. Oh, yes, you carry on. And so I got the last car, which I think was a Holden. And I was trying to work out how to do the last corner up to the timing line, thinking, now, is this going to be pole position or not? And so rather than channel the sentence into, I think was it Garth Tander that went last? Tander goes first, second, third, fourth. I thought, I'll do this for the manufacturer. So to be able to call across the line the last car and say pole position goes to, and as it turned out, Tander didn't go quickest. It was Jamie Winkup's Ford that had already done the time. So you say, Tander up towards the line and pole position goes to Ford, Jamie Winkup is quickest, and you watch the grandstand in front of you, all these Ford fans erupt. You think that's quite cool.
That's a moment, isn't it?
Yeah. So Bathurst is pretty special, because there is no earthly reason why, really, a POM should have gone out to do V8 Supercars. And that in turn led to doing other things like Bahrain, I did for Channel 7 for V8 Supercars later that year, which was a completely random thing, based on the fact that the guy that ran V8 Supercars, a chap called Tony Cochran, heard me and wanted an international sound. The regular V8 caller, a chap called Matty White, was also working for Channel 7 doing what was it called Today Tonight, which is a bit like our 6 o'clock news, big ratings programme. And so to go to Bahrain to do Supercars would have been the best part of a week off air of Today Tonight. 7 didn't want to give him up. And Cochran, bless his socks, said, right, I've got this idea. Let's use this POM. Because all Australians, international motor racing, had an English commentary, if you think about it. Formula One that they got from the BBC or ITV or then Sky, it always had English voices. So he wanted to get away from a very Aussie sound and make it more international, which was with a POM. And
of course, it taught you how to deal with it taught you how to deal with Australians, which has stood you in good stead for commentating on the British Touring Car Championship.
Well, I think one of the viewers of that Bahrain weekend was Alan Gower, because he was managing James Courtney, who was racing in it. And I think that was probably one of the first times that Alan realised that I did the odd bit of telly. But
it was. Yeah,
he got up in the middle of the night and watched it, I think, yeah.
Very good. Sorry, Ian, I interrupted.
No, it was a good comment to make there, Alan. David, I was just going to ask, when you get the call for sort of Bathurst and these big races, and club race, any race really, how much work goes into the preparation? When do you start? In a typical week for you, let's say you've got a big race coming up at the weekend. What does that week look like for you, and how much work goes into it?
I never really sit down for a full day and do it. I'll sort of pick at it a little bit. And if it's something that I'm doing the whole championship for, let's say the BTCC, there are lots of documents that I have that I update at the end of a race weekend, and then I've got them. So I'm not starting from scratch. It's a bit more difficult if you're dipping into something. So if it's a one-off event, obviously there's a lot more homework to do. Depending a bit on the race or the category, the level of homework differs as well, because some championships are really good and will provide lots of information. And for club racing, it's a bit different. I mean, when Alan and I started commentating, not just the BARC, but all the clubs would send out with an entry form a commentator information sheet, and the drivers, not all, but you were encouraged to fill those in. And when you got to signing on, you would hand in your form, and the commentator would go and collect this sort of great big mass of bits of
big
paper.
wad
And
of
they
paper, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, age, occupation, hometown, notable results, and that was all very useful. And unfortunately, as technology has shifted, and you can enter online and enter for a season, you know, that part of the paperwork has rather disappeared. So actually, for club racing, there's a lot less information around now. And inevitably, as people move on and are replaced, the recent generation of people don't know what used to happen, so they don't think about doing it, which is understandable. So, you know, we've mentioned Robin Bradford. Robin was not only a very, very good commentator, but he was an excellent PR man for race series. And Robin, if you like, invented a commentator information pack where you would have this great big folder with a page per driver, all this information about them. You'd get the results, again, dating this, sent in the post after a race weekend that you'd slot into the relevant part of the folder. That doesn't really happen anymore in quite the same degree. So, okay, yes, Google is on your side, but certainly from a TV point of view, I have this discussion with SRO's television people from time to time. They don't want us glued to a laptop looking up driver biogs. They want us looking at the pictures, because otherwise you might miss something, which is totally understandable. So yeah, there's a lot of homework to be done before the event, but equally, however many bits of paper you've got, however many notes you have, certainly from a television point of view, you need to try and carry the information in your head. Now, I can't carry everything, I'll grant you, but you need to sort of think, this is a random example, but let's say for the sake of this, it's Josh Cook's 395th race in race 2. You need to have that in your mind, because the last thing you want while Josh Cook's in the lead is to think, now, Josh Cook, there's something about him. And you start rummaging around and you miss the fact that he has a misfire and somebody gets past him. But when you look up with your fascinating fact, it's all changed. So you've got, you kind of have to carry it. And in a way, the notes that you have are more like a security blanket, just to make sure that you're right in saying what you think. But yeah, I mean, for example, one event that's looming is the Macau Grand Prix. Now, that's 2 weekends this year, so that's something like 10 or 11 different categories. And although some are rounds of a championship, others are just one-off races. So there are people that dip in and out. And probably a good 60-70% of that entry are local Chinese, Hong Kong drivers. So they take a bit more research, as also does the pronunciation. They're not quite as easy as European names to trip off the tongue. So, that takes a little bit more time. But for an average touring car event, probably a full day by the time you've updated the last round and gone through different press releases and made notes, because inevitably there'll be something to draw out of somebody's pre-event information about a driver that won here last year, or he's had, I don't know, 3 top 6s, it's his lucky track, whatever it might be. And those are the notes that you need to sort of scribble to have for when they're relevant. And sometimes you'll never use them because the opportunity doesn't present. You know, that driver that's been really lucky at this circuit is now in 18th place and we never see him.
Yes.
And also, because we're dictated by the pictures, that also influences the information we can use. Where if you're doing it for the circuit, where you're pretty much free to roam, as it were. You know, you can choose whether you're talking about the lead battle or the battle for 10th or whatever, because no one's constraining you to the pictures. You've got a lot more freedom in what you can talk about and who you can refer to.
David, of all the years that you've been commentating, and you just said 32 since you picked up the microphone at the age of 18 years old,
God,
is there is that right? Have I got that right? Yeah. I use my
Probably
fingers and my
about
toes.
that. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, you're most welcome.
Just revealed his age there, Alan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can I have a blanket now, please? Getting a chill.
You cover your knees. You don't need to get chilly. Right. Okay. So in all those years, has there been a standout moment that when you've been commentating, you've been calling something across the line that you think, wow, this is a moment in motorsport history?
Everyone is, in a sense, because each race is new. There are. I mean, it's tempting to keep going back to Grand Prix, and getting Silverstone on their feet at the end of, was it 19 or 18 when Lewis Hamilton came home? Yes. He rather dominated the second. I think it was 2019, and I think when they got to Stowe, I said, "Right, Silverstone, on your feet," and watch the grandstand stand up. That was quite cool.
Yeah, I know.
And going back even earlier. So which year was the wet Grand Prix when Kovalainen led? Was that 08 or 07? And so Kovalainen led early on. They came around Stowe, and Lewis made his bid for the lead going down Vale. And the Stowe commentary box is next to the crowd. The fans are on the bank. They're virtually right next to you. And on the other side, you've got a grandstand. Yeah. And I could see these heads next to me. They watched the McLarens go through, and then they looked back to watch everybody else come through. And I was watching the leaders and said, Hamilton makes his move for the lead, or whatever the phrase was. And out of the corner of my eye, again, I could see all these heads turn back the other way.
Wow.
And go back to watching him in the distance make his bid for the lead. And things like that are quite cool. Being in the pits at Le Mans in 1999, which was the first year I did it, first year I'd ever been to Le Mans, and I was doing the pit lane. And we divided the pits up into a top half and a bottom half. And I got the top half, which included BMW, that won the race. And so you've reported on, I mean, Alan, I think you were there that year as well, you've reported on however many pit stops for a team. And you sort of get to know the odd face and they know who you are. And then at the end of 24 hours, you can't help but get caught up in the emotion of it. You've gone pretty much without sleep as well.
Yeah.
And I can remember it to this day. There are all these big, burly German mechanics bawling their eyes out because, they're tired, they're emotional, they've won, they're happy, all of this. And, what was the PR lady's name? Eva Maria Burkhardt, I think, who was BMW's press officer that year. And she was very, very efficient. And I needed to get an interview with Charlie Lamb because it was a Schnitzer run BMW. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm following him around like a dog with a bone. He's celebrating with that mechanic. He's over there, and I want this first interview with him because he hasn't spoken to anybody yet, other than the team. And I wanted to be the first one to do the interview. And I walked past Eva Maria and said, "Well done, well done." "Oh, thank you, thank you." I said, "Is it possible to talk to Charlie?" "Yes, Charlie, here." And Charlie Lamb spun on his heels and came back like a scalded puppy and did the interview. And I was absolutely amazed. That's how a PR lady does her job. Right, okay, fine. And we got the interview and then he went off and
we
celebrated.
Know he's in charge there.
Absolutely. Things like that, just being sort of caught up in a moment. But every race has something to offer.
Good answer.
You know yourselves. You can go and watch what looks like on paper a really unprepossessing race meeting, and there can be some great races in it. You can go to a really high-profile event, and it just doesn't click. And if people say, what's your favourite race, I normally say, well, the next one, because I don't know what happens in that. I know what happens in all the ones I've watched over the years, but I don't know what happens in the next race.
That's true. That's a really good answer.
Yeah, it is a great answer. We get a lot of people tuning into this podcast, perhaps aspiring to be a commentator or broadcaster. And of course, you've been there, you've seen it, you've done it. What advice would you give to anybody now looking to get into this sort of industry?
Well, I'm tempted to say don't, because I'd quite like to pay the mortgage at the end of the month. But there are lots of questions I would pose at people before channeling them in a given direction. One of the things is, why do you want to do it? Because if you want to get to Formula One, well, there aren't that many openings in Formula One. And if people come up and say, "Oh, I'd love to be a commentator. I watch all the touring car meetings." Well, okay, that at the moment is pretty well catered for. But if you are a genuine motor racing fan and you want to enjoy your hobby in a different way, because there's, again, a difference between doing the track commentary and television or live stream. Part of it, you've got to know what you're talking about. I know that sounds obvious, but liking watching touring cars or liking Formula One does not necessarily mean you're a motor racing fan. So if you want to be a commentator, you're going to start off pretty much doing club racing for the PA. And if you don't know anything about it, you're soon going to get rumbled. It doesn't matter how much you know about the BTCC, but if your first event is the Pembrey event with Welsh Racing Drivers Association Sports Saloons and the MG Owners Club, and you've never seen them before, you're not going to sound great. So ask yourself how much you know about motor racing in general. Ask yourself what you want to achieve. By all means, do some esports, sim racing stuff as a practice. By all means, commentate on things for your own experience. But then listen back to them and listen back with a critical ear. Are you comfortable to listen to that? It's not like, don't let your mum or your gran listen to it, who will say, oh yes, that's really good, in the same way that when you're 5 and you draw a cow and it looks like the Eiffel Tower, somebody says, oh, that's really good, in that way of trying to encourage you, because that does nobody any good whatsoever. If part of, without trying to be overly arrogant about it, part of being a good commentator or presenter, whether it's what we do for television, whether it's what you guys do on a podcast, whether it's what Ian, you do for BARC TV, people listening and watching have to be comfortable with what they are listening to. If they think at any point, oh, this is going downhill, or oh, I'm not sure where this sentence is going, and they almost start to cringe on your behalf, then it doesn't work. You see, for me, the best commentator ever was Barry Davis. It didn't matter what sport Barry Davis did. He did enough homework to sound like an expert, and he also only ever, again, it sounds obvious, talked about what he knew. He didn't get himself into a sentence he couldn't get out of. He didn't say, now, whether this is so-and-so's first gold medal, I don't know. Why would you say that? But people do say that. They admit that they don't know things. Barry Davis never did. So you always came away from whatever you'd listened to him doing totally sold on the fact that he was an expert. But he was saying things without going into a situation where the viewer was left uncomfortable. And so if you're sitting listening to something and you're starting to think that the presenter, commentator doesn't know what they're talking about, or is going down a track of getting things wrong or confused, it's not a comfortable listen. And so if you want to do it and you've commentated on something, listen back and just think, be critical enough to think, now, okay, am I comfortable listening to this for half an hour, 6 hours even of a broadcast? It might have good bits, but is it good enough to hold somebody comfortably for a period of time?
It's not an easy thing to do,
inevitably,
is
people
it?
will get better at it. No. And I listen back to my early stuff and cringe. And yes, as time goes on, you learn things and you get better. So I'm not saying that if what you do as your first offering isn't perfect, give up on it. But we probably all had show reels from people that are of varying levels. Some are good, some are not so good. But listen back and just think, okay, yeah, what do I need to do to make that a bit better before I go to the next level with it? And that might take a couple of years of trying. And a lot of it, as I said before, is a bit of being in the right place at the right time. A lot of my SRO television stuff, which I've now done since about 2010, I think, sort of started by accident, because I'd got a phone call on a Monday to go to Harama to do Super League. Do you remember the old football-themed single-seater championship? And I said, well, I can't go to Harama. I'm meant to be going to Castle Combe or wherever it was that weekend. Anyway, long story short, I ended up going to Harama. It was Super League with what was then called the FIA GT3 European Championship as a support race. That was being filmed. They didn't have a commentator. SRO's TV head was there, and he said, look, if we bung you a few quid, would you mind doing our races? Yeah, fine, not a problem, because I like GT racing. Not a problem. At the end of the weekend, he was very pleased, and he said, "What are you doing next month?" It's the Spa 24 Hours. As it happened, I was doing Spa for the public address, and I said, "Well, if you can move me from one department, as it were, to TV, fine." So he did. And then the following year, what was called Blancpain Endurance Series started, and he said, "Look, you were kind of in at the beginning for this, because Blancpain was born out of the regulations for that year's Spa 24. Do you want to come and do the championship?" And it went from there. Right place, right time. You can write 1,000 emails to people and never get anywhere, but just occasionally, right place, right time. In lockdown, people used to send me messages or try and get hold of me, and you think, "Oh, God, do I really need this?" And I'll go on, and you never know what it leads to. And conversations with people sometimes can have a positive effect. So the other thing is, don't give up. It might be a bit soul destroying at times, but chip away, chip at it, and see where it goes.
Be proactive.
Be proactive. Well, yeah. It's a fine line between proactive and being pushy. Yeah. But have a long look at yourself as a motor racing fan, because if it's a touring car or a Formula One interest that you've got, that's a bit limited. I'd much rather somebody send me an email that said, "I'd like to be a commentator, and I absolutely love the MG Owners Club or the Pre-66 Classic Touring Car Racing Series because the cars are mega." You think, okay, right, you're a club racing enthusiast, we can do something with you. Whereas, and Alan probably gets them as well, people that say, "Well, I'd love to be a commentator, I watch all the BTCC races." It's a bit limited.
All right then, David. Well, I think that about rounds it up, actually. We did say at the top of this, didn't we, that there was going to be an awful lot of talking, but it has been absolutely fascinating, I've got to say. I really have enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
I'm not just saying this to blow smoke because you sat here, but at times I have literally been staring wide-eyed, listening intently. David, thanks so much for coming on to the
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Really do appreciate it, and I hope we can catch up soon. David Addison, everybody.
Thanks very much. Look forward to it.
And just like that, we're at the end of another episode, our penultimate episode, Ian, of the Barking Mad podcast.
Oh, I know, right? Yeah, it does make me wonder what we're going to do every other week when we should be recording this over the off season. Still, though, we've got one final episode of the series to come and a little bit of time to once again tell you about our podcast partners, BP Fleet Solutions UK, allowing you to invest less on fuel and more on winning. The BP Plus Fuel and Charge card can be used at 3,400 locations. And don't forget, the card can be used by anyone. So if you're filling up the team trucks, heading to a circuit as a spectator, or aiming for victory on track, there's a saving to make on standard and ultimate grade fuels.
If you haven't already signed up for the BP Fleet Solutions card yet, then head over to bp.com/BARC, where you can find all the information on this exclusive offer. If you need help, hit the callback button on the website and a BP Fleet Solution UK team member will be in contact.
So, Alan, 2 weeks to go until the final episode of the year. And, of course, quite a big event taking place at Brands Hatch this weekend. It's the final round of the BARC. I know the British Truck Racing Championship are there. Are you going to be there, Alan?
And the pickups. Yeah, I'm going to be there on Sunday. I'm only going there as a spectator. So I've got my big boots, my scarf, my hat. I've got everything that I need to be a spectator. I have been to pretty much every single one of these finales at Brands Hatch, apart from last year. I couldn't go last year. But I'm going this year only as a spectator. It's the first time I've been just to watch, because it is a spectacle. I want the fireworks. I'm a big kid and I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be. I might try and get up there Sunday as well. I'm actually at a wedding on Saturday, so
are you?
I'm not doing BARC TV this week. Yeah, I'm at a wedding on Saturday. Ewan's doing the BARC TV, which is going to be fantastic. Don't forget, watch it at the BARC YouTube channel, The Action. And who knows, Alan, if I get a chance to get up there, I might even see you, and we could get ourselves a nice hot chocolate together. How about that? I'm
going to be wandering around getting as many cups of tea as I possibly can, and hot chocolate. That sounds like a great idea. And of course, as of next week, I'll be out in Macau. So a couple of days after we see you at Brands Hatch. I'll be getting over to Macau for 2 weekends this year. It's the 70th anniversary celebration, so 2 weekends of on-track action, and so the next episode of the BARC'ing Mad podcast, where we do our awards, we'll come up with our final categories, and we'll have a good old chat about who we think we should be putting forward as our winners of the various categories in the next episode. That's going to be in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, it certainly is. Don't forget as well, the BARC website and social media channels are also the place to go if you're after the latest news reports and updates from inside the club. Remember that if you want to get involved with our somewhat impromptu BARC'ing Mad Awards, then give us a potential categories in the comments section below. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll be joined by David Whedon in a fortnight for that. We'll also have an update on our virtual track too, which I'm very much looking forward to seeing, Alan.
Yeah, I've had a sneak peek of that. That is something to savour for the final episode. So make sure you're watching as well as listening to the podcast on your usual platforms, but also watching on the YouTube channel as well. I absolutely cannot wait. Actually, I can wait because I don't really want this season to finish, but it will be the last episode of the season in just a couple of weeks' time. Potentially, we might need to dig out our tuxedos for the. No, I'm not taking a black tie suit to Macau, so I'll probably be in shorts and t-shirts, enjoying slightly warmer weather. That's all for this episode of BARC'ing Mad. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.